Hash the jacket at the bus stop. The snow fell in thick, silent curtains through the amber glow of the street lamps. Each flake caught the light for just a moment before melting into the wet pavement below. The city streets were empty now, save for the occasional car sliding carefully through the slush. It was past 11 on a Tuesday night, and winter had arrived without warning. Marcus stepped out of the all-night diner where he worked the late shift, his breath forming clouds in the sudden cold. He pulled his gray wool sweater tighter around his shoulders and headed toward the bus stop 2 blocks away. His feet were tired from 10 hours of waiting tables, and all he wanted was to get home to his small studio apartment. As he approached the bus stop, he noticed he wasn't alone. A woman sat on the ground beside the metal bench, her back pressed against one of the green support pillars. Her long blonde hair fell around her shoulders like a curtain, partially hiding her face. She wore what looked like an expensive olive green coat, but it hung open and loose around her. Her bare legs were pulled up close to her chest, and her feet were completely bare against the cold, wet pavement. Marcus slowed his steps, taking in the scene. Snow continued to fall around her, gathering on her hair and shoulders. She was shivering, her whole body trembling as she tried to make herself smaller against the winter night. Something about the sight stopped Marcus in his tracks. This wasn't someone who had simply missed the last bus. This was someone who had run into the night without thinking, without preparing, driven by something deeper than the need for transportation. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. The woman looked up as his footsteps grew closer, and Marcus could see her face clearly for the first time. Her eyes were red-rimmed, whether from crying or the cold, he couldn't tell. Maybe both. There was something in her expression that spoke of exhaustion that went far beyond physical tiredness. "Excuse me," Marcus said gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you all right?" The woman stared at him for a long moment, as if she wasn't quite sure he was real. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse and small. "I'm fine," she said, though her chattering teeth betrayed the lie. Marcus looked down at her bare feet, now red and wet from the snow. Without a word, he pulled off his wool sweater, leaving him in just a thin t-shirt. The cold hit him immediately, but he ignored it as he knelt down beside her. "Here," he said, holding out the sweater. "You need this more than I do." The woman, Sarah, though he didn't know her name yet, looked at the offered sweater with something like disbelief. "I can't take that," she whispered. "You'll freeze." "I'll be okay," Marcus replied, and his voice carried such simple certainty that Sarah found herself believing him. "But you won't be, not like this." Sarah's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she accepted the warm sweater, pulling it over her coat and wrapping it around herself like armor. The wool still held Marcus's body heat, and she felt some of the desperate cold leave her bones. Marcus sat down on the wet ground beside her, not caring about his work clothes or the snow soaking through his pants. He didn't ask what had happened or why she was here. Instead, he simply sat with her in the falling snow, offering the quiet comfort of human presence. "I'm Marcus," he said after several minutes had passed. "Sarah," she replied, her voice steadier now. "Sarah Chen." They sat together in companionable silence, watching the snow transform the familiar street into something softer and more forgiving. The harsh edges of buildings became gentle curves, and the usual sounds of the city were muffled into whispered peace. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "I ran away tonight," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "From a meeting, from my office, from everything. I couldn't stay there another minute." Marcus nodded, not pushing for more details. Sometimes people needed to talk, and sometimes they just needed someone to listen. "I'm supposed to be strong," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "People depend on me to make the right decisions, to know what to do. But tonight, I didn't know anything. I just ran." "Running isn't always wrong," Marcus said quietly. "Sometimes it's the only honest thing you can do." Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him. Here was a man who had given her his warm sweater without asking for her story or judging her breakdown. A stranger who sat with her in the snow and told her that running was okay. "I'm the CEO of Chen Enterprises," she said suddenly. "We build community centers, libraries, schools. Places that matter." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "Tonight, my board tried to force me to cut corners on our next project. They want to use cheaper materials, reduce safety features, anything to increase profits. Marcus listened without interruption as she continued. There's this community center we're building downtown. It's supposed to serve families who don't have anywhere else to go. Kids who need a safe place after school, seniors who need somewhere to gather, people like. She gestured vaguely at the empty street around them. People like us, who sometimes find themselves alone in the cold. What did you tell them? Marcus asked. I told them no. I told them we were going to do it right or not at all. Sarah's jaw set with determination. That's when they said they'd find a new CEO who was more flexible, with ethical standards. The distant rumble of the late bus broke through the winter quiet. As the vehicle's headlights appeared through the snow, Marcus stood and offered Sarah his hand. So what will you do now? He asked as he helped her to her feet. Sarah looked down at the sweater wrapped around her shoulders, then up at Marcus. In his simple act of kindness, she had found something she'd lost in all the board meetings and profit reports, the reminder of why she did this work in the first place. I'm going to fight them, she said, her voice clear and strong. I'm going to build that community center exactly the way it should be built. Even if I have to start my own company to do it. As the bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes, Sarah pressed her business card into Marcus's hand. I want you to be there when we open it, she said. As my guest of honor. Marcus looked at the card, then back at Sarah's face, now bright with renewed purpose. I'd like that, he said simply. As they climbed onto the warm bus together, Sarah realized that sometimes the most important business decisions weren't made in boardrooms at all. Sometimes they were made in the snow, with strangers who reminded you why kindness mattered more than profit margins. The bus pulled away from the stop, carrying them both toward morning and new possibilities, while the snow continued to fall like a blessing on the sleeping city.